The latest peace proposal for Ukraine raises questions not only in Moscow, as its provisions remain unclear even to some of its signatories. What role does the US want to play in the post-war reality? Will Europe send its peacekeepers there? And finally, will Russia agree to sign it? To talk about it, we're joined by Diane Francis, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council. Good evening.
Good evening.
So, in your opinion, what could be the actual shape of US security guarantees for Ukraine? Because Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk claims that Washington is ready to use force to protect Ukraine.
Well, that's good news if that's in fact the case. Trump is speaking to the American public tonight, and it's going to be a sweeping speech about everything, from affordability to what he's doing in Venezuela and presumably Ukraine. So we may have some hints there as to what he's doing. But there's basically four issues that have been discussed in Berlin between Ukraine and the Europeans with the Americans as well. There's talks in the U.S. and they seem to be making progress. President Zelensky said they are about 90% agreement on all of the important topics. The first one, of course, is NATO membership. And NATO membership is Ukraine is already a de facto member of NATO, in my opinion. Not being in NATO is okay because they have talked about security guarantees. And this would be to allow boots on the ground from European countries, perhaps the United States, and it's sort of an Article 5, attack on one is an attack on all, for them to go in and provide security guarantees if a deal is signed to protect Ukraine, all of what's left of Ukraine. The other, of course, issue is money and frozen funds, and that seems to have made headway. The Europeans look like they're in agreement to send the frozen funds to Ukraine, and the piece of Donetsk that is now in dispute that Russia wants, even though it doesn't occupy it, is something also that has been dealt with by these various talks that are underway. And the Americans have proposed that this area, it's about a third of Donetsk, is about the size of the state of Connecticut, would be a free enterprise zone. And Ukraine has said, well, that's okay, but if we withdraw our troops from that area, so does Russia have to, and that sort of thing. So all of these talks converged, I think, recently, and has put the ball in Russia's court. Unfortunately, the latest is that Putin absolutely disavowed any interest at all in giving up Donetsk and said, we want Donetsk, and if we don't get it given to us by Ukraine, we will occupy it militarily. So he's put a stop to it. That puts the ball back in the court.
Right. Well, let's say that the ball is actually in Russia's court, as Ukraine's President Zelensky claims that, as you said, 90% of the document is ready, and that Russia shall receive the final version of the peace proposal in the next 2 days. Now, knowing the history of the past 4 years, how long do you think it will take Vladimir Putin to respond to this proposal?
He's already responded to the Donetsk piece and said he doesn't want a free enterprise zone. He wants that territory, and if he isn't given it, then he's just going to continue fighting and conquer it. Ukraine's position on the Donetsk piece is maybe free enterprise, but if we withdraw, they have to withdraw, and it has to have a security guarantee. And, and Putin has kiboshed that. This is very dangerous for Russia now, I think, because there's been a lot of work done by the Americans, the Europeans, and Ukrainians. They have met their minds in many respects. They've been really diligent in working toward this. And for Putin just to dismiss it out of hand is going to annoy Trump. And that may hopefully cause Trump to lose to flip out and to impose more leverage on Russia in the form of sanctions or whatever else, oil caps, whatever else he can do. I think now that Russia has, dismissed it out of hand, means that that could be a trigger for the U.S. to do more.
Right. Now, there's this new bipartisan bill in the American Senate, right, which basically imposes sanctions on anyone who deals in Russian oil. But I'm wondering whether this bill is there because peace negotiations are accelerating at the moment, and Donald Trump needs it to have a leverage over Vladimir Putin, or is it maybe that he will not use it after all? Well, we know what happened with sanctions imposed on Lukoil and Rosneft. They were partially lifted.
Well, he's a puzzle, and he's enigmatic and he's erratic, and I think he's very emotional about a lot of things. Look, he wants to wrap this up. This is going to be his big Christmas present. This is his Nobel Peace Prize. If he can pull this off, he's dedicated a lot of people and a lot of time to this. And I think that if Putin just rejects it out of hand and so on, I think that he's asking for some real serious leverage to be imposed on his companies and on his oil industry. And at least I'm hoping so, because that would be a snub that would be, one too many. Totally unreasonable.
And yet today he stated that to reach a peace deal with Europe under the current leadership is, well, quite unlikely. Therefore, I'm wondering whether this is a message sent to his American counterpart to once again try to sideline Europe in peace negotiations and to reach the agreement directly between Moscow and Washington.
Look, one of Putin's strategies has been to divide the alliance that is in favor of Ukraine winning this war, and he's done a good job. And of course, Trump plays into his hands because he has a deep-seated dislike for European political leadership up to now. He's got to start to realize and start to respect that Europe is really getting its act together with money and with effort and militarizing, and it's very rich. And so, he's also going to school on this. So it's very important that this exercise has gone this far, and I wouldn't discount the possibility that Trump will and all of his bad mouthing of Ukraine for causing the war and Europe for being weak are also just efforts to push some kind of agreement, because at the end of the day, the Americans are kind of on the sidelines, and it's really about Europe, Ukraine, and Russia making a deal.
I see your point there. Well, you said that it's quite possible that Ukraine will receive Russian money, Russian frozen assets will be used to support Ukraine. Well, this scenario seems quite unlikely at the moment because of the Belgian veto on the matter. Now, Ukraine claims that it needs, Ukraine and the EU, they claim that the country needs roughly 135 billion euros to survive 2026 and 2027. If Europe fails to use the frozen Russian assets, do you think that Kiev eventually will get the money some other way?
Well, I think the European Commission has said that they will start to allocate out of the EU itself the money and use the frozen Russian assets as a sort of collateral for the loans. Use it as a loan that they'll use the frozen assets as collateral if Russia sues, and they will lose the right to prevent them from seizing the assets. It's very sticky, and it's a very a delicate legal situation. But I think really the Europeans have no choice but to finance Ukraine, because Ukraine is their police force against Putin, and they will do that somehow. And so that's very important. The boots on the ground is another issue that I think they've made some gains on. And I think that, look, Trump wants this fixed. He doesn't want any more of this. And he thinks it's not a problem, but he's trying to be the good guy fixing it. And let's hope he does. Ukraine is also also not stopping either. It's decimating oil assets that Russia has. It's just blown up a submarine with sea drones. And the other thing that's important to note, and this is a commitment on the part of Europe, that Britain has seized the money that Abramovich raised by selling the Chelsea Football Club, and he's going to give that £2.5 billion to Ukraine. Abramovich owned that team with Putin. So, in other words, he's taking the money that the British are taking, confiscating the money from that asset and giving it to Ukraine. They will find all kinds of other ways to do that and seize assets that the Russians have here and there throughout the European area.
Diane Francis, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council, was our guest this evening. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And thank you for watching and stay with us for more interviews and news here on TVP World.